From the Fox News Channel website, Florida and South Carolina have single highest rates of coronavirus outbreak in a single day. Let me respond to that. So what? No, you heard me. So what? The never-ending cycle of fear and hysteria, all designed to do one thing and one thing only: get rid of Donald Trump. They're hoping that even his base just every day gets tired of waking up, and no matter what's happening, that somehow, some way, it's either the president's fault, he hasn't responded right, his tweets, he's making the problem worse, he doesn't get it, or even if they figure out that this is all just being thrown at him as a political hit job, it doesn't matter. They're hoping to get people to the point where you become so weary, so tired, so frustrated with it all, you just say, you know what, I like the president, but maybe we just need somebody else, so they leave us alone. That's now what they're hoping for. I was wondering how long it would take after the riots and the protesting began to calm down before we would get, the corona scare. It's amazing. For 2 weeks, we heard no reporting on COVID. In fact, responsible reporters were saying it was the right thing for you to do to go out and protest. Funny, a month ago, when people were protesting in places like Michigan, that their state reopen, that they be allowed to go back to work, that they be allowed to even go outside and just cut their own grass, why, they were irresponsible. They were spreading the virus. They were going to kill people. And Governor Whitmer was well within her rights to continue the restrictions, the lockdown, and the shutdown. But then, when people began to point out the obvious, hey, you got mass thousands of people in the streets, but they're doing it responsibly. They have masks on. And right now, there's something more important than your health. It's our rights as far as justice, equal justice. It's all hogwash hooey. The stats are finally in. They are beyond overwhelming. They can't spin it. If you get coronavirus and you are under the age of 65, you have a 99.9999% chance you will recover. This is not the plague. This is not the end of the world. If you are over the age of 65, you have a 98% chance you're going to survive. The only one that this is absolutely fatal to is if you are extremely old, in declining health, with serious health issues. In that case, stay home. Self-quarantine if you need to. If you've got to go out and you want to wear the mask, wear it. Otherwise, this whole asinine nonsense where we quarantine the healthy and got you to put on the mask of fear. And that's what it is. It is the mask of fear, because you see the masks around, and it's this constant psychological reminder. There's a pandemic. There's a virus that's out there to kill people. It is all about reinforcing the fear. I said it almost 3 months ago when this nonsense started, and I reiterate it. Dr. Fauci Stein, the evil love child of Dr. Kevorkian. And I know a couple of you that watch my channel, you don't like it when I say that. Let me say it again. Dr. Fauci Stein, the evil love child of Dr. Kevorkian, along with Brexit, whatever her name is, Bree, the scarf woman, out there talking about how horrific this is, and we have to do social distancing, and we've got to close the schools, and you can't do anything until there's a vaccine, and blah, 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 blah. Yet, a week before they were saying all of that, they were telling us, don't worry about it, live your life, go to ball games, go do things. And then a week later, all of a sudden, the opportune moment struck. Again, I've said these little rat weasel nerds who nobody ever paid attention to when they were in high school and in college because they were just brainiac little bookworms. Now all of a sudden, people were listening. Presidents, governors were doing what they said. That's intoxicating. They became like little rock stars unto themselves. But we've begun to see legislators starting to look at the evidence. The evidence that the books were cooked, even by the CDC. So I don't even believe we have over, quote, 100,000 deaths. Don't believe it. I flat don't believe it. Now, I don't want to sit here and start throwing out numbers because then I would be doing what they're doing, which is just lying. And that's what they have been doing. They have been lying and making things up. The whole 6 feet of social distancing. Yet, we're also told why, when you cough, the virus can spread up to 27 feet. So what's the point of doing 6 feet if it's spreading 27 feet? The doctor that came up with that 6 feet, that the CDC jumped on and WHO jumped on and Dr. Fauci Stein jumped on and that became the standard. Well, the doctor, the scientist that came up with that basically said, I was taking a stab, it was a guess. In other words, I made it up. I made it up. This whole thing is a crock. I have been conducting funerals now that we're allowed to have them again. Imagine that. Imagine being in a family where a loved one died and you were told by the state you can't have a funeral. Can't do it. Well, I've been conducting funerals, and so far they're all outside because there's no restriction on how many people can attend. And I saw a woman at a funeral I just conducted a few days ago wearing the mask outside, and she was coughing. And I get it, okay, that keeps it, from her spraying us, but at the same time I'm thinking, woman, you're rebreathing now your own germs. You're rebreathing now your own nasty air. Pull the mask down, turn your head away from everybody, cough into your elbow if you have to, but breathe in fresh air. In the state I'm in, they have now said that playgrounds can reopen, which nobody could ever show me the science behind why were we closing playgrounds to begin with. What is inherently bad about being out in direct sunlight? What's dangerous about that? It's vitamin D. Vitamin D strengthens your immunity. And I said from jump, what is it about Dr. Fauci and all these medical experts that keep talking about vaccines and life can't return to normal until there's a vaccine, yet they never say anything in the meantime about what you can do to strengthen your immunity. They're not interested in immunity. They're not even interested in your health. This is about control. This has been a mass mental raping and ripoff of the American people psychologically to put you in fear so they could put you in compliance. Put you in fear so they could dominate and control, period. I said it from jump, and I have been vindicated. And now other people are now seeing it and reporting on it. And on the one hand, I want to say, well, you're a little late to the party, but glad you're finally on board. Glad you finally get it after you were part of the problem perpetuating the lie. 99.99% of the people recover. And some legislatures have begun to push back. In the state of Ohio, the Ohio version of Dr. Fauci is a woman by the name of Dr. Acton, who has been one of the most, throughout her career, progressively pro-abortion people, pro-death. Now all of a sudden, she became the be-all, end-all in the state of Ohio, and what she said literally became law instantaneously. A number of lawsuits in the state of Ohio, naming directly Governor DeWine and Dr. Acton. On Thursday, Dr. Acton resigned. About time. Now, I'll tell you exactly how that went down. I know what the governor officially said in his press conference. Well, she has served our state well, and she just feels the time is right for her to just move on to do other things, but I'm going to keep her, part of my cabinet as one of my trusted advisors. DeWine is by definition a wimp. He just is. He is just a little nerdy wimp. I'm sorry. This is the kid that when he was in school ran the class projector. This was the kid that when the teacher left the classroom would say, now, Michael, you keep a list of anyone who talks while I'm gone.
Okay, Mrs. McGillicuddy. You'll behave.
Somehow, he became the governor of the state of Ohio. Nobody even knew who he was, including people who live in Ohio, until this pandemic hit. And all of a sudden, the media treated him like a rock star because he was the first one to enact shutdowns. He was the first one to say, your president's not taking this seriously enough. And his daily press briefings are too glib. We need to take this seriously. Seriously. And the only reason he got elected in the state of Ohio, Kasich was done, good, and he was the guy on the ballot that had the R next to his name. Trump had campaigned for him, and people just assumed, well, he'll be the Ohio version of Trump. He'll just carry. No. Now, he's worse than Kasich. He is he sounds tough and he's mean. We're gonna do this, but as soon as there were rumblings and protests, he began to talk about reopening. And now the state legislature has said, we have a problem here. We can't just turn what we do as policy over to unelected people, i.e. Dr. Acton. So they're proposing legislation that the governor in a state of emergency can, order a lockdown, a shutdown, or whatever. He's got 14 days. Then after that, he can't just keep coming out with these press conferences, he and the doctor, and adding another 10 days, adding another 30 days, and just, keep adding to the list of you can't do this, you can't do that. No, the state legislature is putting legislation through that says you got 14 days of that, and then if you want to extend it beyond that, you got to bring the evidence, you got to make the case to the legislature and the legislative body, because we are a republic. We are a representative form of government. The legislature will vote and decide whether or not to continue and how far wide and ranging and reaching it can be. Shazam Batman. So DeWine sees the writing on the wall. He sees his own party turning against him. Good. So he told Dr. Acton, you make some of this die down. You're going to have to resign. And I'm sure she doesn't want to be named in lawsuits. Cedar Point, the largest amusement park in the state of Ohio, rivals Disney and Universal Orlando. Well, they're looking at what's happening in Florida and they're saying, why can't we open? And they're suing. Bar and restaurant associations are suing. They're allowed to reopen, and some of these inane, stupid rules that they have been allowed to reopen under, it's just crazy. One of them is they can be fined and even lose their liquor license if patrons are, quote, not seated. So what happens if a person gets up to go to the bathroom? And there's no ruling, there's no decision, it's ridiculous. And people have begun to realize now en masse, this was hyped, it was blown out of proportion. We said from get-go, Fauci, Stein, and Bill Gates, this was about forcing a compulsory vaccine. Fauci finally came out of hiding the other day, and Good Morning America had him on to talk about, what about the protesting? Is this going to create a spike? Well, I definitely think it could. And then, of course, he had to do the whole politically PC hogwash of, but it's important that these people have the right to protest, but this is the guy that didn't want to reopen schools in the fall. This is the guy that if schools do reopen, they're not going to look anything like school has ever looked before. And yet the protesting, that's okay. You have a number of doctors who came out and said that protesting it must happen. It's actually for our own well-being. I contend that some of the rioting and looting we have seen is not simply triggered by, quote-unquote, feelings of racial injustice and George Floyd, and some of it's not even about just taking an opportune time to steal and loot and do it all in the name of, quote, a protest. I think some of what we're seeing, the pent-up rage and anger, isn't necessarily driven by just race. How about the frustration of this is what happens mentally when you lock down and you control and you restrict people, and they have said, we've had enough. Nobody's talking about the long-term deadly effects this has had. senior adults dying in nursing homes without any family, no one there to be their advocate, no one there to give them peace and comfort so that they didn't die alone. This is outrageous what has been done. Outrageous. And so now they talk about Florida and South Carolina had 1,500 cases each in a day. This is awful. No, it's not, because they're not providing any context to the numbers, that 99.9% of the people that have it will not die. And 98% of them over the age of 65 will recover. The only ones who do not recover have serious extenuating health issues. And they love to tell, well, we've had a 20-year-old die, we've had an infant die. One. Do we lock down 300 million people? For one? Do you understand the overreach here? Do you understand the setup that this has been? This has been about they're going to mass quarantine, and of course they want to use that as a biochip to do all kinds of other, we're going to have to scan you and approve you and know what you're... This is bullhock. They're psychologically training people to line up, get your head scanned. In other words, line up. And the thing is, now we see it for the farce that it is. And even the mainstream media is catching on. Even now, when they try to bring Fauci back out, nobody's listening. He was asked on Good Morning America, so what has the president said about the... Oh, the president doesn't talk to me anymore. I thought that was funny, actually. The president doesn't talk to me anymore. Good! He never should have listened to you to begin with. If the president had listened to voices like mine, he wouldn't have listened to you. This is just... I have nothing but contempt for these people. Because as a pastor, you declared the church not essential. There were all kinds of criminal implications if we conducted church services because people will die. But yet they can gather and protest. CDC comes out this week.
You should still limit your social gatherings to 10. And if you're going to organize a protest, keep it to 100.
What? So if I want to have a birthday party in my backyard, I got to keep it to 10. But if I'm going to meet to have a protest, I can have 100. So I guess we'll call the birthday party a protest. I'm protesting getting old. I'm protesting I have to buy all these candles for my cake. A pastor in New York, to get around the restrictions of not being able to have church, changed his worship service to prayer and protest. When he was asked by the local media, what will you be protesting? He said, well, I'm going to protest sin. I'm going to protest godlessness. It was great. The pastor's become my new hero. But it shouldn't be this. And this is not about
spoiled Americans not getting to do what they want.
This is about we are a free nation. And to live like we're in permanent quarantine, to live like we're in solitary confinement, this has been such an egregious breach of our constitutional rights. And there's nothing more obvious than this was a drill, a test run. How far can we push the American people to do what we want? Thankfully, it was, forgive me for saying it this way, a premature ejaculation, because you know they wanted to ride this right into the fall, and they're still talking about there could be a second wave in the fall because they don't want you to go vote. They want to do mail-in voting. Funny, we can protest safely, but we can't go vote? Give me a break. Give me a break. If you don't see the political hit job that this actually is and what it is now, and again, nobody's saying that the virus is made up. Nobody's saying that it's not real. Nobody's saying that people haven't gotten sick and that some haven't died. But I'm sorry, it's 500,000 people worldwide. This was compared to the Spanish flu, which wiped out millions, plural, millions. This isn't anywhere close. It is a lie. It has been nothing but a stronger string of the flu. I said that on day one. I got blasted. I got lampooned. I got laughed at. I am now vindicated. The president said as much. And then the fearmongers in his administration, surrounded by the swamp, they got to him. And you could tell in some of those press conferences, the reason he seemed off of his game was not because he doesn't know what he's doing. He knew instinctively this was BS. He knew it. But he also knew that he was going to get killed politically and they would blame every death on him. So to a certain degree, he had to play the game. And now he's had enough. He's going to restart his rallies again. You can't do that. Yes, he can. And the GOP convention is going to be held in Jacksonville. You can't have it in Florida. Florida's, they reopened everything and now the corona cases are going up. So what? This is what you got to start saying when you start seeing this on the news. There's more corona cases. Just start practice it. Say it out loud with me right now. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. So what? You turn on the news tonight. Corona cases across the country increase. Say it out loud in your living room. So what? So what? So what? This is not the death plague. It's not. We have been lied to. This has been hyped from jump. Enough is enough is enough. And finally, there is somebody left on faux pas news, formerly known as Fox News, who does tell the truth. Tucker Carlson. And rather than being like Sean Hannity, who tries to walk both sides of the fence, I get so frustrated watching him the other night talking about police brutality, and he had his list of ideas of what he thinks ought to be done, and every single guest he had on, no matter what they were there and supposed to be talking about, he would bring up all the main points of his monologue and ask them if they agreed with him. And you could tell certain guests were looking at him like, this is not what your producer told me that I was being brought on here to talk about tonight. Why am I not allowed to talk about what I'm supposed to be talking about? Why have I just got to come on here and affirm you? Yes, Sean, boy, you're brilliant. You're right. Shut up, Hannity. I've gotten to the point where you exasperate me. Shut up. But Tucker Carlson is a truth teller. He is. I have nothing but respect for Tucker Carlson. And his monologue the other night, he absolutely nailed it.
Millions of Americans remain subjected to unprecedented restrictions on their personal lives, their daily lives, their families' lives. The coronavirus lockdowns continue in many places. You may not know that because it gets no publicity, but it's true. And if you're living under it, you definitely know. As a result of this, tens of millions of people are now unemployed. A huge number of them have no prospects of working again. Many thousands of small businesses are closed and will never reopen. More Americans have become dependent on drugs and alcohol, seen their marriages dissolve, become clinically depressed. Some of them delayed their weddings. Others were banned by the government from burying their loved ones in funerals. Some Americans will die of cancer because they couldn't get cancer screenings. Some unknown number have taken their own lives in despair. Others have flooded the streets to riot because bottled up rage and frustration take many forms. The cost of shutting down the United States and denying our citizens desperately needed contact with one another is hard to calculate, but the cost has been staggering. The people responsible for doing all of this say they have no regrets about it. We faced a global calamity, they say. COVID-19 was the worst pandemic since the Spanish flu. That flu killed 50 million people. We had no choice. We did the right thing. That's what they're telling us. Is it true? The answer to that question matters, not just because the truth always matters, but because the credibility of our leaders is at stake here. This is the biggest decision they have made in our lifetimes. They were able to make it. They rule because we let them. Their power comes from us. So the question now and always is, are they worthy of that power? That's not a conversation they want to have. And right now they don't have to have that conversation because right now all of us are distracted and mesmerized by the woke revolution underway outside. They just created a separate country in Seattle, huh? And as we said, we'll bring you the latest on that in just a minute. But we do think it's worth, for a minute, taking a pause to assess whether or not they were in fact lying to us about the coronavirus and our response to it. And the short answer is this: yes, they were definitely lying. As a matter of public health, we can say conclusively the lockdowns were not necessary. In fact, we can prove that. And here's the most powerful evidence. States that never locked down at all, states where people were allowed to live like Americans and not cower indoors alone, in the end turned out no worse than states that had mandatory quarantines, the state you probably live in. The states that did lock down at first but were quick to reopen have not seen explosions of coronavirus cases. All of this is the opposite of what they said would happen, with great confidence. The media predicted mass death at places like Lake of the Ozarks and Ocean City, Maryland, places where the middle class dares to vacation. But those deaths never happened. In the end, the Wuhan coronavirus turned out to be a dangerous disease, but a manageable disease like so many others. Far more dangerous were the lockdowns themselves. For example, in New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Massachusetts, panicked and incompetent governors forced nursing homes to accept infected coronavirus patients. And as a result, many thousands died, and they died needlessly. This is all a remarkable story, but it's going almost entirely uncovered. The media would rather tell you why you need to hate your neighbor for the color of his skin. The media definitely don't want to revisit what they were saying just a few weeks ago, when they were acting as press agents for power-drunk Democratic politicians. Back then, news anchors were ordering you to stop asking questions and obey.
All right, so while most Americans are staying inside, or should be, right, if they're not out protesting like fools, they're not happy about being told to stay home. Staying home saves lives. And the rest of us should be staying at home for our mothers and the people that we love, and to keep us farther apart will ultimately bring us closer together in this cause. Our collective, conscientious actions. Staying home.
Oh. If you love your mother, you will do what I say. Turns out cable news anchors don't make very subtle propagandists. And then Memorial Day arrived in May, and some states started to reopen. Millions of grateful Americans headed outdoors for the first time in months, and the media attacked them for doing that, called them killers. Swimming with your kids, they told us, was tantamount to mass murder.
Jam-packed pool parties at the Lake of the Ozarks resort and other places over the holiday weekend. Few, if any, people were wearing masks or practicing social distancing. Hardly.
Packed into overcrowded pools despite the ongoing pandemic. Let's face it, the weirdness of being that bunched up in what looks like a kind of human stew.
Frankly, a lot of the people in those crowds, they thought they were, standing up for what the president believes in. And that is not to care about the public safety part of this.
Look at this. I mean, this is kind of crazy considering we're in the middle of a global pandemic. I mean, as one person quipped, that's curving the curve. That's not flattening it.
A massive crowd of people crammed together as if it were just an ordinary holiday weekend, despite the risks of a virus that has killed more than 98,000 people.
Boy, that montage was the opposite of a Mensa meeting. Has that much dumbness been captured on tape ever? The last clip you saw was from May 25th. That was just over 2 weeks ago. 98,000 people are dead. How dare you leave your house? You don't work in the media. You're not essential. But it didn't take long for that message to change completely. In fact, it took precisely 5 days. Here's the same brain-dead news anchor you just saw less than a week later. He's no longer angry, you'll notice, about Americans going outside. As long as they are rioting and burning and not doing something sinful like swimming with their children, he's delighted by it.
And let's not forget, if anyone is judging this, I'm not judging this. I'm just wondering what is going on, because we were supposed to figure out this experiment a long time ago. Our country was started because this is how the Boston Tea Party, rioting. So do not get it twisted and think that, oh, this is something that has never happened before, and then this is so terrible, and where are we, and these savages and all of that. This is how this country was started.
Yeah, don't judge. This is how this country was started, by looting CVS and setting fire to Wendy's. Of course, you took American history. You knew that. Andrew Cuomo's brother must have been in the same history class because he had the same reaction.
America's major cities are filled with people demanding this country become more fair, more just. And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful, because I can show you that outraged citizens are the ones who have made America what she is and led to any major milestones. They're here to yell, criticize, blame, and shame. Citizens have no duty to check their outrage.
Wow. So 1 minute they were mass murderers for going outside. Now they're Sam Adams. They're patriots. They're American heroes. If all of this seems like a pretty abrupt pivot, fret not. Rioting is not a health risk. As long as it helps the Democratic Party's prospects in the November election, Rioting will not spread the coronavirus. Sounds implausible, but we can be certain of that because last week, hundreds of self-described public health officials signed a letter saying so. They announced that the Black Lives Matter riots are a vital contribution to public health. In effect, they're an essential medical procedure. But that doesn't mean you get to go outside. You don't. Thanks to coronavirus, you do not have the right to resume your life. And if you complain about that, it's, quote, white nationalism. That was their professional conclusion. Does a single American believe any of that? No, of course not. It is too stupid even for CNN to repeat, so they mostly ignored it. That's an ominous sign if you think about it. It means these people are done trying to convince you, even to fool you. They're not making arguments, they're issuing decrees. They think they can. They no longer believe they need your consent to make big decisions, to run the country. Once the authorities stop trying to change your mind, even by deceit, it means they've decided to use force, and they have. During the lockdowns, people whose loved ones died were not allowed to have funerals for them. Think about that. It's hard to think of anything crueler, but it happened to a lot of people. They claimed it was necessary. It was not necessary, and we know that because now that a man has died whose death is politically useful to the Democratic Party, the authorities have given him 3 funerals and not a word about a health risk. Or consider King County, Washington. That's where Seattle is. Restaurants in King County are operating at just 25% capacity. That's the law now. Non-essential businesses are allowed just 15% capacity. The effect of that is economic disaster. Most small businesses run on very small margins. They can't survive for long, and in fact, many have failed. What should they do? They should join Antifa, obviously, because in King County, Washington, Antifa can do whatever Antifa wants to do. Tonight, they've taken over an entire 6-block section of downtown Seattle. And that's fine with health authorities there. No social distancing required. They're essential. You getting the picture? Is this adding up to a message? Yes. The message is you were played. We were all played. Corrupt politicians scared us into giving up control over the most basic questions in our own lives. At the same time, they gave more power to their obedient followers, like Antifa, while keeping the rest of us trapped at home and censored online. In other words, they used a public health emergency to subvert democracy and install themselves as monarchs. How were they able to do this? The sad truth is they did it because we let them do it. We believed them, therefore we obeyed them. If there's anything good to come out of this disaster, it's that none of us will ever make that mistake again.
Boom. There it is.